All right. Good evening, everybody. Just let me know if you can hear me okay, first of all. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. We can all join palms as we begin. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. And putting the palms down. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to Intro to Buddhism and Meditation. Thanks for joining us tonight. I always like to start with a question just to get people communicating and also give it a little time for everybody to jump on before we start the meditation. So the question I have for you all tonight is, when dealing with adversity, challenges, difficulties, how good are you at treating the situation with respect and decency? So a lot of different ways to word that question. That's just kind of what came out. But again, when you're dealing with adversity, how easy is it for you, or how difficult is it for you to remain calm or continue to have decency and respect? I'm going to go ahead and type that question in here. Dealing with adversity, easy or difficult is it for you to respond with decency and respect? All right, so there's the question to get us started. Give me a minute while I just grab one thing, and I'll let you all chime into that question. I'll be right back. All right. So again, when dealing with adversity, for those of you who just joined us, the question for now is, when you are faced with adversity, how easy or how difficult is it for you to respond with decency and respect? We're often challenged whether it's, for many people these days, it's unfortunately so much of it is driven on social media. Some of you may spend a little bit of time there. Maybe it's phone calls with family or friends. Maybe it's difficulties with relationships from the past, or colleagues from work, whatever it might be. There's so many different scenarios and situations where we face challenges. So when these people or places or things really push our buttons, are you able to practice equanimity, which is one of the fundamental Buddhist teachings? Loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. And are you able to really keep a steady kind of mind and not be swayed too much emotionally? And it doesn't mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you don't fight for what you believe in. It doesn't mean that you don't stand up for yourself or others. But can you do it without being emotionally destroyed? So let's see here. And if you are brand new to joining us, welcome. There's a chat box there. You can hopefully see on your screen somewhere people starting to chime in with some responses. So go ahead and feel free to type as little or as much as you'd like. I'll kind of walk through them relatively quickly, and then we'll get started with the meditation in a couple minutes. Let's see, Bill, not too difficult in general, but I think it depends on the kind of adversity. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if there's small adversity that doesn't bother you too much, well, it doesn't bother you too much. If there's great adversity that bothers you a lot, well, there you go. Depends on what day of the week, for sure. Hello, Benton from San Francisco. The default mode is with fear and trepidation. However, with practice, you try to have the right view and learn to be in the present and accept what is. Yeah, definitely. And that's the key word, which I always say a million times, which is practice. Practicing the kindness and compassion and forgiveness and understanding and everything we learn through Buddhist teachings. The more we practice and the more we focus on right view, it hopefully becomes a little easier to stay present and be with things as they are. Michael, definitely depends on my level of stress and anxiety, but things have gotten easier over the years. Yeah, definitely. Our kind of emotional states going into a situation filled with adversity really has an impact. Beth, I can respond with respectful behaviors usually. Teaching teens has given me plenty of practice staying positive and calm, but sometimes internally I get stressed. Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to kind of recognize, to always keep really a good feel for how are we doing. And if we find ourselves in situations where stress is greater than other moments, we try to avoid maybe putting ourselves in situations that would create adversity as much as possible, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Chuck, I seem to have the hardest time dealing with adversity when I forget that I actually have the ability to deal with it. Yeah, it's kind of like a default mode. If we've been reacting or triggered and responding in certain ways for so many years, that when we're triggered, we often forget that, oh, wow, there's another way to deal with this. And hopefully we can remind ourselves there's another way to deal with it before we've already blown up the situation. So I find myself mostly emotionally affected by ignorant, intolerant words and actions. Yeah, and this is a challenging one because when we hear other words or actions or review other, words or actions, we label them as ignorant and intolerant. And this is really difficult to control our emotions during times like this. But again, it's why the practice is really important. Mario, well said, Charles. Sometimes you forget all the tools. Definitely. Marisa, internally not always so well, but externally better. Yeah, and that's that's a good, I think, a good realization and a good starting point to recognize that if we can build kind of this clear and this really perception of what's happening to us emotionally internally, but not always throw that out onto everybody else, it's really important. Greg, I agree with a lot of what people said about it being, but about it being react gracefully when other things are going well. Yeah, definitely. So good responses, good thoughts, just something to get people thinking a little bit. And what's that? Ehead 15. Thank you. You're welcome. My pleasure. All right. Anyone else? Feel free to chime in as we get started here with the meditation practice. So, for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, again, welcome. Couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who might be new, nothing's going to happen. You won't float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long won't shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working or not? Don't judge yourself. We judge and critique things all day long. What we look like, what we wear. We're constantly in these judgment modes. And so this practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still and trying to go beyond judgment. Don't expect anything. If you're sitting there waiting for some grand aha moments or deep realizations, you'll be pretty disappointed. So we're just going to sit and breathe. Posture, just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable for you. Eyes will be closed if comfortable or slightly open. Mouth will be open or closed. I'll guide us as we begin, and we will settle into a little bit of silence. Eyes closed if comfortable or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Going throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds inside your room, outside. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Noticing as we sit, the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, returning attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Return attention, focus to the breath. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet and calm and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called Pratitya samupata, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply is, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole lives are filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. The practice of meditation is learning what it's like to respond quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. But meditation is free. sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it is a practice. When we find ourselves dealing with adversity, which we always will, remember what it's like right now. Because this level of clarity, stillness, calmness, if you have that, is what you want with you at all times. If somebody's yelling at you right now, screaming at you, if you're driving and someone cuts you off, if those things happen to you while you're in this emotional state, if this state is calm or quiet or relaxed, then things aren't so bad. But when we are constantly stressed out and anxious and angry and depressed and miserable, it's like a stove that's always burning hot. And the water is always boiling, and all it takes is one tiny little thing to trigger you. So learn to turn the stove off. Allow yourself to cool off, to settle. So with that, I think I'll stop and open up to questions. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. I always prefer to just respond to questions. There's a chat box there on your screen. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with that I can address. And we use the rest of the time for that. Excuse me. Thoughts, questions? Is it un-Buddhist like? I'll finish reading. I was going to respond to just that, but is it un-Buddhist like to put metaphysics aside and just practice? Or is it part of right view to have the right metaphysics, such as no self? The reason I almost stopped without reading anymore is my first thing that I want to respond to is the idea of un-Buddhist, and knowing the nature of your questions, I can pretty much understand where you're coming from, but I still want to point this out for anybody else who might be new. I wouldn't be concerned with being Buddhist or un-Buddhist like. I would be concerned with just being a kind, compassionate person. And that means you can be Christian or Catholic or Muslim or Jewish or pagan or lack thereof. I wouldn't try to be Buddhist. This practice isn't about trying to be a Buddhist. It's about trying to be kind and looking at what the Buddha himself actually taught. Years ago, a friend said she was Catholic and she began to practice Buddhist teachings. And she said that it actually brought her closer to her Catholic faith, that she felt it was like a software upgrade. And she began to practice Buddhism in her daily life, and she felt it made her a better human and a better Catholic. And I think that that's a beautiful application of the Buddhist teachings. So first and foremost, I just want to say that for anyone who might be new, that Buddhists are not trying to make you Buddhist. Most of the people here are not Buddhist. If I do a class and there's 70 people there and I say how many of you are Buddhist, you'll see about 2 hands. So keep that in mind first. The second thing I'll say around right view, and I'll just touch on this briefly. Right view is the first step of the Eightfold Path. So you have the core teachings of the Buddha, which is the Four Noble Truths. The first one, life is dukkha, suffering. We suffer a lot. The second one is the cause of suffering. That's greed, anger, ignorance. We overcome that with generosity, compassion, wisdom. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering, nirvana, liberation. And the fourth noble truth is the path. And this is called the Eightfold Path. And this is having the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. All of that is available on Google. You can just check it out. Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and most of the stuff you'll see will be pretty similar. So the question is, I'm not really getting the metaphysics side, but no self is not a metaphysical thing, at least how I understand metaphysics. But again, putting that aside, let me just address the teachings of no self. No self doesn't mean that you're not here. It doesn't mean that you don't exist. The core and heart of Buddhist teachings is that he said there is no inherent self. So if you really want to get to the heart of what the Buddha was teaching, you must begin to practice non-self. You can't skip that part. But again, it doesn't mean that you're not here physically. It just means that you're here in a completely different way from how you perceive yourself to be. That you have all these stories about you. I am Bill, and this is where I'm from, and this is how I was raised, and this is my family, and these are my friends, and these are my life's experiences, and these are the traumas I went through, and this is my hope for the future. Those are all stories. But none of them are actually who you are. They're just things that have happened. So non-self is understanding that you are a physical form with endless causes and conditions, karma that has happened in your life that's created your consciousness or a part of your consciousness. And that consciousness has been around for endless time, and it will continue to be around for endless time. And that consciousness currently exists in this physical form body that when you were born, they said, we're going to call this thing Bill. So for me, understanding non-self is to abandon the story and just be present with life as it is. If you don't have a story about a past family member that makes you angry, then every time you talk to them, they won't trigger you. If you don't have a story about every heartbreak you've had, then when you engage in a new relationship, you won't have all the fears and worries surrounded by it. These are all stories. They create the self, the ego. Can we go beyond that sense of self, beyond the ego, and just abide in present moment? So you can't skip non-self, right? The idea behind Buddhist teachings is you wouldn't say, well, I'm going to do everything, but I don't agree with that non-self part. What that means then is you don't really understand what non-self is. So I would continue to study and research the teachings on no self. So hopefully that answers your question. Bill, or whoever you are. Benton, when you said letting go of judgment and expectations from the practice, it dawned on me that this has to be practiced beyond sitting here, but everywhere throughout our lives. Yeah, absolutely. And Benton, you've heard me probably say this before a lot, but to me, we practice meditation not to be good at meditation, but to bring that level of clarity and stillness, or ideally whatever you're sitting with during meditation, into our daily lives, right? So when we're sitting in meditation, we have these often judgments or expectations of what we think is going to happen from the practice. And that's why I say that. But that's really all just a metaphor for every day of your life. Experience your life as it is. Yes, and this is a common question that comes up. Yes, we have goals, we have dreams. I'm not suggesting that we abandon those. We have things we work towards, we work hard for. But can you work hard for something or someone? Can you work towards your dreams and your goals without being attached to the outcome, knowing that many of them won't come to fruition? This is really the practice of diligence tied in with the practice of non-attachment, right? And so for me, is a real live, perfect example, when we 4 years ago worked to acquire the new Dharma Bum temple. It was a 4-month journey of being incredibly diligent every moment of my life and working hard towards the goal and the objective, which was to acquire the property, but without being attached to the outcome. Knowing that you can't control the end result, you can only control what you're doing right now. So you work hard without any attachment to the outcome. And when you're working in that manner, then, as I always say, letting go of judgments and expectations from the practice in your life, you are letting go of judgments and expectations, because judgments and expectations are nothing more than a story and a label you're putting on something. Judgments and expectations have nothing to do with what you're actually doing. So just focus on what you're doing. If you have a project at work, don't focus on the outcome. Focus on what you're doing. If you have a dream or a goal you want to accomplish with someone, then focus on what you're doing. So, but yes, definitely carry that into your lives. Thanks, Benton. I like that, to think of non-self as a practice rather than something to believe or not believe. Right, because there is no self to believe in self or no self. There's no I to like what I said or not like what I said. These are all tons of judgments and labels you're putting. I like that. So as soon as you say I, you are giving rise to sense of self. As soon as you say like, you are giving rise to duality, this versus that. So I like goes out the window completely. So hopefully that's helpful. Chuck, yes, to not trying to be Buddhist. Given that, how do practitioners decide whether to pursue a monastic path, and what is the process like, to make the question not so vague? Say within a Chan context. Chan is a Chinese word for Zen. So the question of pursuing a monastic path, and what is the process like? I'll start by saying this, and even though you kind of narrowed it down to a Chan context, so if that were the case, then you'd be looking at a Chan or Chinese or Taiwanese Buddhist temple, monastery life. Japan, you'd be looking at in a Japanese culture, a Zen monastery temple life, and each one of those will be different in its own right. The process will be unique, but I think before you even get into any of that, the process of deciding whether or not to pursue a monastic path it really has to be, it's renunciation. And the monastic path is about renouncing your attachments and cravings and desires to this kind of everyday lay life that we have, and these physical attachments and cravings and desires. Imagine just you have nothing but a robe and a master, and that's it. And you would have food to eat and a place to sleep, and you would have a robe to wear and a master to follow. I mean, in the simplest form, that's traditionally for 2,500 years. That's what monastic life is. The Buddha is said to have had 7 items, right? He had a robe, he had a bowl, he had a razor to shave his head, he had a stone to sharpen the blade, he had like a strainer to drink water, to get the water without killing the bugs, thread, needle to sew the robe. So 7 items. Most of us have 7 items on our possession at this very moment. Monastic path really has to come from this pure intention in your heart and mind that says, I'm going to renounce my everyday lay life. And for most Western lay people, it's just not practical. It's not something you force. And to me, it's something that if you're going to renounce and become a monk or a nun, that it's something that you vow to do for your entire life. And most people aren't really ready for that. Each tradition, I think, just to bring it kind of locally, Meta Forest Monastery, which is the Thai forest, the Theravada tradition up in Escondido, Ajahn Jeff Thanissaro Bhikkhu, a lot of you know, we've had him as a guest at the temple many times, and we take retreats up there. They have, and I don't know the details, Josh or Travis would know better, but, when there's a young monk, I shouldn't say young, but when there's someone who wants to become a monk, there's a kind of like for lack of better words, a trial period where they will reside there and practice with the monks and under Ajahn, and almost as kind of like a testing ground, a testing period, a trial period. Is this person really ready to live the renunciate life prior to actually doing it? And again, I don't know all the details and the length of time. My guess is the length of time might even be different depending upon what the master thinks. But so I don't know if that answers your question. I think that you really have to, in your heart, say, this is the path I want to follow for my life. And then from there, you would find a Chan temple or monastery, and you would show up and say, this is what I want to do. And you would meet with the headmaster, and they would want to understand why. And probably there's a great book, D.T. Suzuki, Training of the Zen Buddhist Monk. One of my favorite books. So Training of the Zen Buddhist Monk. I think that's the title. Suzuki. So it walks through a lot of what that experience is like. So hopefully that's helpful. Other questions? And for the record, Chuck, I think you'd make a great monk. I mean that seriously. Absolutely. You are welcome. Any other kind of last question before we wrap up here? All right, so I'll go ahead and end on that. We'll join palms. We'll do a transfer of merit. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained be transferred to those who need it most. So a few quick announcements. And Beth, I just saw your question here. I'll comment on it very quickly, and then maybe if you join us on Saturday, I can start with that question. But any suggestions for how to use meditation practice to change unhealthy habits? Don't use it to change your habits. Just do the meditation practice. And in time, your unhealthy habits may change. But it's not like you sit down and say, I'm going to do a meditation for unhealthy habits. It doesn't work that way. You have to recognize your unhealthy habits and change them, which is really separate from doing your meditation practice. But the deeper you cultivate a meditation practice, the less likely you are to have unhealthy habits. So that's a brief response. A lot of people are into this, like, I'm going to meditate so I can be, powerful. I'm going to meditate so I can stay up all night. I'm going to meditate so I can have a Ferrari show up at my door. I'm a Zen practitioner, and I sit quietly in silence for no reason whatsoever other than just to sit quietly in silence. That's it. And then from that, your life will unfold. So thanks for being here. I'm Jeff from the Dharma Bum. We opened up the Dharma Bum Temple 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice. Those of us who lead, we're not monks or nuns or gurus or masters. We're just practitioners. And we do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we're here on YouTube. The rest are on Zoom. We have been closed since March. So about 9 months. We'll continue to stay closed until we feel it's safe to reopen. So thanks for being here. If I never see you again, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. The website, dharmabums.org, has the class schedule. Buddha for You is also closed, but we are selling stuff online now. So you can go to that website, Buddha for You, as well, and check that out. If you have any questions, just let me know. So hope to see you all soon. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds, and good luck.